We are globally crowdsourcing creativity.
Once in a lifetime opportunity, a giant technological leap forward.
We're very concerned about water scarcity and water resources. We want to do something about it, and we want to do a competition. Yes, we have desalination technology. It's still a very small percentage of the fresh water we produce, and over 70% of it is located in wealthy nations. The big problem we're aiming to solve, we have not seen anything beyond some incremental innovation in decades in desalination. It's very limited to wealthy nations that can afford the capital costs and the operational costs, and that's a problem.
Welcome to this episode of the Salty Water Podcast. Today we're going to focus on what is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the desalination industry to possibly make a giant technological leap forward. This is due to the XPRIZE organization taking up the issue of water scarcity and sponsoring a global competition for new technologies or novel materials that can prove they are reliable, affordable, and sustainable at scale. Today, we're fortunate to have the one person who can tell us about this project, and that is Lauren Greenlee, the Executive Vice President for Food, Water, and Waste at XPRIZE, which is managing the water scarcity project. Lauren earned her BS in engineering at Michigan and her MS and PhD in chemical engineering at the University of Texas, and she has an MBA from the University of Iowa. She's taught engineering at Penn State and the University of Arkansas, and prior to joining the XPRIZE, she held CTO and leadership roles in tech startups. So she's well experienced for this role at XPRIZE. Welcome, Lauren, to the Salty Water Podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
You know, I'm a private pilot personally and an aviation enthusiast, so I closely followed the Ansari XPRIZE by Peter Diamandis in 1996, which ultimately awarded $10 million in 2004 to Burt Rutan's Scaled Composites Group. The requirement at that time was for a reusable spacecraft that could make 2 trips to space within 2 weeks. This competition is now credited with kickstarting space-related companies such as Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and SpaceX, as prior to the prize, space launches were exclusive to government agencies such as NASA. The concept of incentive prizes follows the historical example of such prizes like the Ortig Prize, which led to the Charles Lindbergh 1927 transatlantic flight. So Lauren, let's start with the big picture. For those who are not familiar, who have not followed the XPRIZE, can you expand on how it has evolved since 1996, and what are the current goals and objectives of the XPRIZE as an organization?
Sure. Well, that was a fantastic background. I think our first prize, the Ansari XPRIZE, is such an amazing example of the model, and you really hit on it. That model is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it required physical demonstration of technology. 2, it set out with a very simple outcome that was very easy to understand, easy to judge. So teams had to send one person into space, as you said, reusable. So one person into space, in fact, 100 kilometers into space. So it was an exact distance, twice in 2 weeks with the same spacecraft successfully. These were expected to be private organizations, companies. That model really has continued. So a couple of key tenets, I think, have helped to build out the organization across any prize that we've done. One is that we really focus on physical demonstration of technology. 2 is that we focus on the outcome. So we don't define what the teams, what their solution is necessarily. We're defining what the outcome is. And the teams really come in with their ideas and their creativity. And in that way, because we run global prizes, we are globally crowdsourcing creativity. And what XPRIZE has done is to go on and test out that model. So I would say in the years following 2004, we did a range of prizes across different areas, different sectors. But I would say in the last 8+ years, with our current CEO, Anusha Ansari, who was one of the funders of that first XPRIZE, with her in that leadership position, we've really started to pivot towards, I would say, the next iteration of what XPRIZE is, which is we have established 5 different domain areas, and we are strategically now building out work in those 5 areas. So that covers everything from health, learning and society, deep tech and space exploration, energy, climate, and nature, and then, of course, the domain that I lead, which is food, water, and waste. And we're very, I think, intentional about those 5 domain areas and see a lot of opportunity. So XPRIZE has certainly grown, but I think we've become also more focused and more strategic, but still very much based on that, I think, original and unique model of demonstrating technology, defining the outcome, but not defining the solution, and really setting that goalpost out in front of competitors beyond what is happening today.
Yeah, yeah, it's so aspirational, and
Yeah.
try to be a force to move these things using
Yes.
science and technology is fantastic. So let's talk about food, water, and waste. This is your area of expertise at the XPRIZE. What are you focused on, and what have you accomplished in the food, water, and waste sector from the XPRIZE point of view?
Well, so my tenure is not so long yet at XPRIZE. I'm coming up on 3 years this year. Prior to me joining, we did not have a person leading the food, water, and waste
Okay.
area. So one of our youngest domains in terms of building out an ecosystem, building out strategy and the directions we want to take. I think we saw as an organization saw a lot of opportunity. We did have an earlier water prize that was focused on creating water, drinking water, pure water from air. And then we
Mhm.
had a food oriented prize that was focused on alternative proteins. And I think Anusha, our CEO, and others at the organization felt that very strongly that we should build out this area in food, water, and waste, and really to create a domain focused on those 3 sort of separate from the energy sector, which, of course, I'm sure, you know very well that water and energy are very closely linked and often get talked about together as a nexus. But we really wanted to highlight food, water, and waste as its own domain and really build out that domain to try to tackle some problems. So, we've done a little bit, but the goal is really to build out beyond what we've done so far.
Well, it's great. But desalination is certainly a big topic to grab
Yes.
onto. Yeah. Being interested in aviation and space, to me, it was remarkable to see the recent picture from Artemis of the Earthrise behind the moon, because I was struck by the contrast of this barren, cold landmass against the overwhelming and spectacular view of the clouds and the oceans on Earth. And it made me realize once again that we live on a planet covered in water, yet certain regions are water scarce and have relied on seawater desalination to create an economy and a human habitat. How did the X Prize come to focus on this area of desalination as a subject area? And how would you define the problems and or the solutions that you're seeking to drive with this competition?
Mm. Well, it was really a joint, I would say, creation effort. We had what is now the Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative out of the United Arab Emirates come to us and say, we've been looking at the space. We're, very concerned about water scarcity and water resources globally, and of course for their region of the world. And we want to do something about it, and we want to do a competition. And so they came to us wanting to build something with us. It was really a unique opportunity to do that together with our experience in running global competitions, and certainly with their vision and their motivation, and also the work that they already put in to really try to narrow in on what within sort of the very broad landscape of water scarcity, what would be good to focus on. The decision around desalination, I think, is a very interesting one. Many people would argue that we have desalination. So why would XPRIZE and the Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative choose to focus on desalination as a first prize? I think it has really brought to light this assumption that we have desalination, it's fine, why would we work on it? And I think that is actually we've been able to shine a light on the fact that that's a false assumption. Yes, we have desalination technology. It has existed in different forms over many, many years, hundreds of years, in fact. However, it's still a very small percentage of what, the fresh water we produce. And over 70% of it is located in wealthy nations. So that should tell you something about, what the barriers are. So really the big problem we're aiming to solve with this competition is to say, look, we have not seen anything beyond some incremental innovation in decades in desalination. And for it being so commercialized, it's very limited to wealthy nations that can afford the capital costs and the operational costs. And that's a problem. That's a problem for equitable access to fresh water, particularly when you consider the number of cities that are growing, especially the ones, for example, mega cities, but even smaller, but still very big cities that are coastal, have access to saltwater resources, but don't have access to the technology because of the capital and operational costs. And so really we want to see teams pushing to innovate in ways that bring down both of those cost categories. And I think there are a lot of opportunities when you start to think beyond the existing systems today. And we're really aiming to break that assumption barrier that the problem is solved.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think really with Emilio Gabrielli's new book, The 7,000-Year Story of Seawater Desalination, you can actually go back to the ancient Etruscans and the ancient Greeks who used these primitive alembics to desalinate seawater one drop at a time. And if I look over the last 100 years, I see three big leaps forward. After the steamship era, Professor Silver in Glasgow brought the evaporators to land-based systems in the Gulf countries and really started commercial desalination using thermal technologies. And I would say Sidney Loeb at UCLA to transitioning the semi-permeable membranes to cellulose acetate membranes in the 1960s really led to seawater reverse osmosis. And I would say the final one was Leif Hauge at the end of the last century, inventing the isobaric energy recovery device, which reduced the energy consumption 60%. So I believe, that there are potential leaps forward. We could have a significant cost reduction if we just look at the last 100 years of history. But can you talk a little bit more about, I'm interested in the Sheikh Zayed Water Initiative. Beyond the XPRIZE, what are they doing? Can you speak about their role and what is their agenda? If you can talk about that.
Well, I know sort of high level, I'm certainly, not part of that organization, but, they are on a mission to help solve global water scarcity. A big part of that is awareness, and another part of it is growing a global ecosystem of innovators. So, for example, the Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative launched a second prize last year, more focused on agriculture.
Okay.
And they have, in fact, I think it was just last week, they announced in their sort of milestones, they had a new announcement of the teams that are moving forward in that competition. So they are looking at other areas that are very important for water supply and water scarcity. Obviously, agriculture is a huge one. I know they have interest and a vision to continue growing that effort. I don't know what's to come, but I'm sure we'll see great things out of that organization.
Okay. Thanks for that. Let's shift gears, talk about the competition itself, the process. I think you cast a very wide global net, encouraged many, many people from many places. I think you had something like 675 registered teams from 86 countries. You've refined that down through your process to 143 qualified teams and 2 tracks. Can you explain the difference between track A and track B? And what are the next steps in the competition? Where do you go from here?
Yes. So track A and track B are quite different. They're both technical tracks. Track A is focused on system level innovation. So all of the teams in track A are building full desalination systems, and they will be going ultimately in the finals to 1,000 cubic meters per day production level. Track B is much earlier in terms of the R&D progression. There, we are asking for innovations in the salt water separation step. So really zeroing in on the base case, I suppose, today is reverse osmosis desalination membrane. So those are the membranes. That is the step as within the desalination system where the salt is actually separated from the water. We want to see innovations at that step. It does not have to be an RO membrane.
Mhm.
And that track B actually allows for either methods and or materials. So it can be a new method, it can be a method material combo or a new material. The big targets that we're looking for teams to demonstrate are around really robustness. So lifetime, being able to demonstrate the potential for a much longer lifetime than what we see for RO membranes today, and that associated with cost. So we'll be having some sort of cost and sustainability metrics in by the time we get to finals. You asked about what are the next steps. So we are just coming off of a semifinals announcement. So we will have a press release on May 12th, and then we are headed to the Global Water Summit in Madrid during the week of May 18th, where we will be announcing the teams that are moving forward. So there are 20 teams in track A moving forward into semifinals and 17 in track B. And
Okay.
those teams will all be testing later this year. So we'll have another round of physical testing in both tracks. And from there, next year at this time, we'll be likely announcing our finalists.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Yeah.
So you're basically keeping to your original schedule.
Yes, I think we are more or less on time.
Are the current conditions in the Gulf with the hostilities affecting any of your operations or your schedule?
We've had some teams definitely have some challenges in terms of finishing out their testing. We just completed testing for the qualified teams round. So there were some challenges for some of our teams. And then we did have to shift. We had an event that we were helping to support and plan with our sponsor in Abu Dhabi. It was going to be a brand new but premier event that combined an innovation summit, an investment summit, team activities, and announcing our semifinalists, and that all had to be pivoted, unfortunately. So we're hoping to continue to do Abu Dhabi events, hopefully later this year, and then we will have a strong presence at the Global Water Summit as a replacement for the original May event.
Okay. Well, adjustment and reality.
Yeah. Yes.
In recent decades, the generalized per cubic meter cost of large-scale seawater RO is reduced generally, people say, from $1, a cubic meter to below 50 cents. The other thing that people look at is specific energy consumption, which people believe is about 2.5 kilowatt hours per cubic meter for that separation process itself. But in your own view, given your knowledge of this industry and where you are in the prize, do you have a good feeling about a breakthrough in some of this, or are you happy with incremental changes as you go forward? Reality is reality, but what's your view being so steeped in this now and participating in this process?
I think both of those metrics are really interesting, and we've talked a lot about how we structure the details of the prize, the rules, the judging, how our judges think about these metrics when they're looking at team performance. We sort of landed in different places. So for the energy metric, we do have an energy component to the judging, and we actually have a Moonshot award associated with energy efficiency. We have 4 different Moonshot categories in track A. And each of those teams have the opportunity to win additional prize purse if they are sort of the best in that category. And so we have one for energy because, even though energy has come down tremendously, we felt with our sponsor that there was still room there, and perhaps we might see some really sort of game-changing ideas. And we wanted to highlight that as an important factor.
Right.
So the cost is also really interesting. I will say one thing that we decided not to set a specific cost target for several reasons. One is and I'm sure you know this, but the huge variability in normalized cost,
Mhm.
project to project, region to region, and based on factors that actually aren't part of the competition, right? So we're not judging teams. We are specifically not judging teams on energy source. That is not part of this competition. But we're also not judging teams on costs that are outside of the actual technology system itself. So loan structure or land
Mhm.
cost or um, you know, the human employee cost, and other cost factors that go into, we're not the piping and distribution system, we're not considering. So there are so many pieces to how much water actually costs when you're doing a full project that we didn't want to. It would just be very difficult to judge because you're not actually seeing that in the competition itself. The other piece is a really important piece at XPRIZE across the board when we consider cost as a metric. As you can imagine, with innovations that are earlier stage, and even when teams are trying to scale, teams that are earlier in their journey, it is next to impossible to reach costs that they would have at scale,
Right.
for fully commercialized. And so what that does in a competition, if you set a cost metric too stringently, is that you deter innovation and you even deter teams from entering in the first place because people think, oh, well, we'll never be able to hit that cost metric. So it's actually a deterrent of creativity and breakthroughs and innovations even at scale when teams are trying to scale up to pilot scale. So we try to be very careful about
Yeah.
setting costs. Instead, what we are going to be doing is working with the teams to try to evaluate cost, sort of relative cost against baseline. So really more looking for changes. Where are their innovations going to be able to make changes in either the capital cost or the operational costs, and why? We want to understand why. It's really more about teams demonstrating that they are targeting certain cost areas of cost and that they can demonstrate to our judges a sort of valid reasoning as to why. So we're really approaching it more that way because at the end of the day, we want to see the innovations coming through. And we know that costs will come down as those companies grow and commercialize and scale.
I mean, it is a huge challenge to have a level playing field for evaluation and
Yes.
testing, and even just what kind of equipment do you use for testing, and how is it all, unified and made standardized. So, well, this is very exciting. I'm glad the timing is working out. It's so exciting for the industry. I look forward to the hearing about the press release in a week or so. And we're coming near the end of our time. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up the podcast?
Well, I would love for your listeners and viewers to certainly look out for our announcement, to check out the teams that are coming through the competition. If anyone happens to be going to the Global Water Summit, a good number of our teams are going to be there. Our team, the XPRIZE team, will be there. Would love to, connect with your listeners, answer questions, get to sort of share our teams that are moving forward. And of course, your audience can also always check us out at xprize.org.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations on an exciting competition.
Thank you.